Good morning, friends. Today I wish to speak to you on the struggles of Bharatiya Dharma. That is the need for having an Hindu nation, or the struggle that's going on to establish India as a Hindu Rashtra, which has been speeded up in the past few years. Now, if anyone who's born in the Indian family, he's taught certain basic things as a child by the grandmother or grandfather. They introduce, by way of stories, little capsules like Atiti Devo Bhava, that is, a guest should be treated like a god. Satyameva Jayate, truth always wins. Karmanyavadikaraste, Mafaleshu Kadachana, that you have right only over your duty, not to the fruits thereof. One such statement, which is of recent currency, is Ahimsa Paramo Dharma. That is, non-violence is the highest virtue. But there is a second part to that sloka, just as there is for that Karmanyavadikaraste, Ma Phaleshu Kadachana, there is a second part which is less known, and that is Ma Karma Phala Hetur Bhuma Sango Stava Karmani. Meaning that while doing karma, what is necessary is you should give up the sense of doership. Then only that entire instruction of the Bhagavad Gita is complete. That is, do the karma by surrendering the fruits thereof. Then you will not be affected by the karma that you do. That is the advice of Sri Krishna to Arjuna. When Arjuna says, all these people who are standing in front of me are my relatives. How can I kill them? So he says, you just kill. Your duty is to kill. So, and you will not be affected by that karma because they are already dead. What you have to do is you have to simply surrender the fruits thereof to me. But then, how do you surrender that fruits thereof? That is, you surrender the sense of doership of that karma. So that's the second part of that Karmanyavadikaraste shloka. Similarly, in this presently about that dharma, that is dharma himsa tathaiva cha. That's the second part, which means that violence in the service of dharma is also dharma. So there's that sloka which is being put everywhere on those who follow RSS and all that about dharma. So here is that they resort to a justification of the violence, that violence in the service of dharma is also dharma. Now here this word is taken very literally by the followers of proponents of dharma, and so instigate violence amongst communities, including by groups who owe allegiance to certain deities like Hanuman and certain other deities, and who take up arms and distribute and force themselves upon the members of the society, causing alarming situations, which has led to the question is, what really is dharma? And to what extent we can go in the name of dharma, to protect in the name of dharma. Now, when we seek to protect our dharma, it's not in the nature of victimhood. It's a testament to the resilience, to the civilizational courage, to the undying breath of Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana Dharma is an eternal Dharma. It's not a call to arms, but to awareness. It does not mean to pick up the weapons, but to sharpen the mind and spirit. It is to honor the legacy of those who resisted, not just with swords, but with scriptures, with memory, with reproducing from memory the Smritis and identifying with that. Yes, the justifications put forward is because of the tremendous attacks on Indian civilization. If we look at the attacks on India historically, let us look at it right from the times of Adi Shankaracharya, or even 2 centuries before Adi Shankaracharya. The first one was from the east on the educational temple of India, the Takshashila. So the city which was founded by Bharata and which was glorified in Ramayana and later ruled by his son Taksha. Its associations included revered Vedic sages like Uddalaka, Aruni, Panini, Chanakya, and Charaka, offering instructions in Vedas, medicine, astronomy, law, military science, and archery, often free of charge. This was between 4th and the 5th century, 4th and 5th centuries. Then the civilizational university saw invasion by the Kedarites and later by Huns under Mirakula, devastating the region, leaving it desolate and scholars gone. That was the beginning of a systematic erasure of a civilizational memory. Mirakula's campaigns swept across northwest, targeting not just kings but the dharma flourishing in the kingdoms. The next major invasion was in the beginning of the 8th century near the coastal areas of Thane and Bharuch in Gujarat. This disrupted trade and revealed the coastal weaknesses. The first Arab-Hindu conflict was around this time, 712 AD, in Sindh by Caliph Umar, where Raja Rasil was defeated. And that was the region's first political and religious transformation. Sindh became a Muslim province under the rule of Umayyad, with local Hindu elites subordinated. This conquest set a precedent for later Islamic invasions into India. The Sun Temple of Multan was the first to be desecrated. However, the defeat of Umayyad's forces by Bappa Rawal of the Guhila dynasty, culminating the Battle of Rajasthan, and Bappa Rawal's triumph fortified India's defense and ensured a reasonable stability for another 2-3 centuries, that is almost till the 11th century. It was then that Muhammad Ghazni ended Hindu sovereignty in the region. The raids into Ganga Yamuna heartland, leading to the devastation of Mathura and its religious traditions as birthplace of Krishna, could not be fully recovered, and it resulted in a psychological assault on Hindu faith, significantly impacting the civilian and priestly Hindu communities. This assault on the Hindu identity, with the demolition of Hindu temples, was halted to some extent by later rulers, mainly by the greed for revenue and revenue from the tax, and so they allowed the temples to continue, but they had to pay tax. But the attack on the Somnath temple, shattering the Shivalinga, one of the important Panchayatana devas of the Hindu culture, struck a blow to the Hindu morale, making Somnath an enduring symbol of resistance and resilience. The looting of the temple has embedded deeply in both Hindu and Islamic narratives, established a pattern of temple destruction in India. The slaughter, looting, and sacrilege marked a civilizational trauma, reverberating for centuries in the Hindu memory until its restoration. Somnath still remains a symbol of Hindu endurance and restoration. Mahmud's raids devastated the temple economies and regional stability, weakening Hindu kingdoms and prompting fortified temple architecture post 1050 AD, that is around 11th century. But by then, the plundering and looting of precious gems and jewelry, stealing of gold and and silver idols from the temples continued. The attackers then after that, they turned to granaries and massacred or even enslaved the civilians. The attack then spread to Mahoba, that is the capital of Chandalas in the Gwalior region in central India. And it established a model for later Ghurid and Turkish campaigns targeting urban economic centers for maximum impact on the Hindu politics. In the 12th century, Ghori's victory over Prithviraj Chauhan led to the destruction of Ajmer's Sanskrit College and conversion of temples into mosques. Rajput families enslaved. The Chauhan kingdom was fragmented. Then came the rise of Qutbuddin Aibak. It evolved into the Delhi Sultanate, symbolizing the end of classical Indian military strategies and saw the beginning of centuries of Muslim rule in northern India. He then led a force that devastated Banaras, destroying thousands of temples and raising mosques in their place. The 1193 destruction of Nalanda and Vikramashila, once iconic centers of learning, marked a cataclysmic blow to India's intellectual heritage. It signaled Buddhism's decline in India and the loss of priceless repository of Sanskrit, Pali and Prakrit texts. Surviving monks fled to Tibet and Nepal. Modern excavations reveal the profound civilizational loss. From 12th to 16th century, the Sultanate entrenched Islamic rule in North India with continued temple desecrations, forced conversions, and cultural synthesis. The rebuilt architecture had a mixed flavor of Indo-Islam, and up to almost 50 or 40% of the Gangetic Plains population had been converted to Islam. That in 1234, Sultan Ilutmish of Delhi Sultanate launched a devastating attack on Ujjain, the Mahakaleshwar Jyotirling. That it saw the destruction of the silver and astronomical instruments that were used for calculations of the Hindu calendars. This dealt a severe blow to Ujjain's spiritual and cultural vitality. It was only when the Maratha ruler Ranuji Shinde built Mahakaleshwar temple in the 1734 that there was at least a symbolic Hindu resurgence. Temple economies in Gujarat and Deccan collapsed, forcing communities to adapt. South Indian temples were often rebuilt with fortified walls within decades. Khalji's raids in 13th and 14th centuries devastated temples in Devagiri in Maharashtra, Dwara Samudra in Karnataka, Madurai in Tamil Nadu. However, unlike Ghazni, Khalji installed garrisons to appropriate temple revenues. So there was a shift from Hindu devotional practices from temple-centered rituals to personal and village-based worship traditions. So there was a kind of a dilution of the religious practices. During the 13th to the 17th century, there was a mass displacement of Vedic scholars and loss of Vedic educational system. The Bhojashala, a Sanskrit university and temple dedicated to Saraswati, established by King Bhoja, faced systematic desecration under successive Islamic rulers. Vedic education was disrupted and gurukuls were closed forcibly. British colonial authorities, notably Lord Curzon, in 1902 sent the original Saraswati idol from this place, Bhojashala Sanskrit University, to London. Hindu groups demand restitution, but legal and political hurdles continue. Coming to the south, Malik Kafur, the Delhi Sultanate forces, attacked Chidambaram Nataraja temple, one of the holiest Shaivite sites in Tamil Nadu. A temple that was deliberately targeted because it was an important spiritual center. Apart from looting the golden roof tiles and jewels, Brahmanas were beheaded. The palm leaf manuscripts preserving Tamil Shaiva literature was burnt, erasing centuries of religious scholarship. This was an attack on Shaiva metaphysics and Tamil cultural resilience. Though the main deity was hidden by the priests, as was the case in several other temples as well, the temple's sanctity was shattered. Shaiva worship adopted secretive agamic practices to safeguard the traditions. The trauma of this desecration continues to resonate in Tamil Nadu even to this day. Again, the plundering of by Muhammad bin Tughlaq of the Sri Ranganatha Swami temple, a cornerstone of South Indian Vaishnavism, when thousands of unarmed devotees were slaughtered. Scholars and priests were killed in the temple complex itself. Tughlaq forces stole over 4,000 kilograms of gold and destroyed thousands of palm leaf manuscripts from the temple library, severely disrupting Vaishnavite scholarship and worship. The massacre catalyzed Vaishnavite militarization and preservation of rituals in exile. The event left a scar shaping regional and devotional practices and temple defense traditions for centuries. Another region was Puri, which came under the attack by Shamsuddin Shah of Bengal, who plundered the treasury of Puri Jagannath temple, killed devotees, enslaving temple dancers, desecrating the sacred kitchen. What was unique was the deities were smuggled away and were replaced by replicas. Therefore, the site's spiritual significance was retained. The battle of Mudgal between Bukkaraya I and the Bahmani Sultanate, led by Muhammad Shah I to trap the Vijayanagara forces, led to huge deaths. Seizure of wealth, including elephants, artillery, a battle entrenched the Krishna Tungabhadra regions, which shaped the southern geopolitics for generations. Vijayanagara responded with innovations such as Nayaka cavalry system, fortifying the temple complexes, and bolstered military dominance and set the stage for continued Deccan conflicts. But it also later laid the foundation for the Deccan warfare, bringing innovations in mobile artillery. If we go to the north in Kashmir, Shah Mir dynasty launched a campaign in the 14th century to eradicate Hindu practices in Kashmir. Historical accounts, including Jona Raja's continuation of the Rajatarangini, detail the systematic destruction of the Martand Sun temple using fire and brute force. Idols were desecrated, temple wealth confiscated, ending centuries of Hindu temple building. Martand's destruction symbolized the decline of classical Kashmiri Hinduism. Taimur's victory over Delhi saw the decimation of North India's capital and destabilized the Tughlaq dynasty, leaving the region vulnerable to future invasions and intensifying the Hindu-Muslim tensions. Delhi lay in ruins for years. Refugee artisans migrated to Bengal and Sindh, spurring economic shifts. Taimur's invasion served as a grim template for later conquerors like Babur at Panipat in the early 16th century. Avantipura's temples became ruins under Sikandar's destructive campaign. Hindu practices were suppressed and communities faced forced conversion or exile. The cultural heritage of the regions was irreparably damaged. The present excavations reflect the grandeur of Kashmir's past and the tragedy of its religious suppression. The 16th century vandalizing of the temples of Mathura by Sikandar Lodi, annihilation of Meerut by Taimur, mirror the devastation inflicted in Delhi, exemplifying the ruthless nature of their India campaign. The arrival of Vasco da Gama towards the 15th century saw the Christianization of Goa, domination of the Indian Ocean commerce, destruction of Hindu temples, and massive conversions. It set a precedent for future European colonial powers such as the Dutch, British, and French. Discrimination extended to denial of public office, property rights, and legal standing for non converts. Many Hindus fled to Karnataka and Maharashtra, preserving traditions. Portuguese colonial rule suppressed Hindu cultural identity in Daman and Diu, replacing it with a Luso-Christian community. India could reclaim the territories only in 1961. I'm reminded of Vikram Sampat's words. This was not merely the collapse of temples, but the attempted dismemberment of a civilization. Yet Dharma endured, wounded, but never broken. The fall of Vijayanagar fragmented South India into Nayaka kingdoms and sowed seeds for Maratha and Wadayar resurgence. The Deccan Sultanates, though momentarily triumphant, soon descended into internal conflict. The ruins of Hampi today stands as a silent testament to Vijayanagara's grandeur and its tragic fall. Aurangzeb's 49-year rule from 1659 to 1707 marked a significant reversal of Mughal religious tolerance. Destruction of over 300 temples, including Kashi Vishwanath Temple, Keshava Dev Temple in Mathura, execution of Sikh Guru Tej Bahadur for defending Kashmiri Pandits, all drained resources and undermined the Mughal administrative framework. Aurangzeb's policies sowed long-term divisions. After his death, Hindu powers arose. Marathas rebuilt temples like Somnath and Sikhs established the Khalsa Raj. A study by historian K.S. Lal on medieval India estimates that India's population declined from 200 million in 10th century, that is 1000, to 125 million in 1500. That is a loss of 75 million people over 5 centuries, mainly due to repeated invasions, forced conversions, massacres, enslavement, and the collapse of the agrarian systems under the Islamic rule. Sambhaji's execution. Sambhaji, son of Shivaji Maharaj, by Aurangzeb's forces, instead of acting as a deterrent, ignited a fierce guerrilla campaign under his successor Rajaram. The Marathas regrouped, employing the guerrilla warfare, exhausted the Mughal forces, and inspired future generations. The Maratha Empire eventually reasserted dominance with its legacy celebrated in Maharashtra and beyond. The three battles of Panipat saw the Marathas drive away Abdali's dominance in North India. Marathas regained powers. But after the Battle of Buxar, British consolidated its powers in India. The East India Company, though, who came as traders, seized revenue control through the Treaty of Allahabad, dismantled indigenous governance systems, and triggered Bengal's economic collapse. Hindu peasants and artisans faced unprecedented exploitation, while Mughal legitimacy crumbled. This paved the way for colonial hegemony and cultural subjugation. Despite token reforms, colonial exploitation continued, leading later to famines. Bengal's wealth was siphoned off to Britain. Colonial suppression of Hindu education severed generational dharmic transmission, replacing it with utilitarian colonial education system. Traditional learning collapsed. Indigenous Hindu education systems was dismantled. Sanskrit pathshalas teaching Vedas, mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy were sidelined. Hindu children, especially in Bengal, Madras, and Bombay presidencies, lost access to dharma based education instructions, breaking generational continuity. Ayurveda, astronomy, and holistic sciences were overshadowed by Eurocentric curriculum. This cultural erasure created an alienated intermediary class, seeding a long term intellectual colonization that India continues to confront today. Even post independence, India's educational frameworks remained heavily influenced by colonial policies with struggles to revive holistic dharmic education. In the late 18th century, Tipu Sultan targeted the Mandian Iyengar community of Melkot, a Vaishnavite Brahmin sect with deep ties to the region's religious institutions. The massacre remains a poignant example of the intersection between political rivalries and communal suffering in the late 18th century South India. Tipu's troops' invasion of Kerala, where temples were looted and Brahmins were persecuted. The Nayar warriors deeply revered the Brahmins. They withdrew, demoralized. Mysorean forces desecrated temples, destroyed idols, and raided agraharams, disrupting century old traditions and educational systems. However, the survivors fled to Travancore, where the Maharaja granted them refuge. This event shattered the morale of Hindu resistance, leading to Mysorean dominance in the region. The massacre left a lasting scar on Kerala's collective memory and fueled anti Tipu sentiments among later generations. The revenue reforms of the British East India Company in the Madras Presidency undertook sweeping revenue reforms that resulted in the confiscation of extensive lands historically endowed to Hindu temples. Temples, which traditionally functioned as socio-economic hubs through land-based endowments, supported education, free feeding, medical aid, and cultural patronage. This colonial policy set a precedent for post-colonial state control of temple properties, contributing to a lasting legacy of economic and cultural suppression of South India's indigenous institutions. Christian missionaries targeting Dalit communities, socially ostracized and the economically deprived, portraying Christianity as a pathway to dignity and social equality. Conversions were incentivized with food, education, and employment in mission schools and hospitals. Some Dalits embraced Christianity as resistance against caste oppression, while others reconverted to Hindu revivalist movements. The missionary campaign deepened caste fissures, and sowed the seeds of long-term communal polarization in Tamil Nadu, Andhra, and Kerala. It disrupted the social fabric, eroded indigenous traditions, and sparked Hindu reform movements. The interplay of colonial power, caste oppression, and religious conversion that shaped India's socio religious landscape face ongoing legal hurdles. Hindu communities enduring lasting economic decline, land dispossession, and social demoralization, showing the resilience of the Hindu communities even today. The British justified their actions as law and order enforcement, but historians view them as a systematic colonial terror aimed at erasing indigenous resistance. The Aryan Dravidian race theory, concocted by the British Indological and colonial administration, falsely divided India along racial lines. The theory alienated South Indians from their Vedic heritage and distorted India's historical narrative, causing a cultural fracture that persists in academic and political discourse even today. The Aryan Dravidian race theory fractured India's cultural unity, promoting divisive narratives that still echo in Dravidian political rhetoric. It institutionalized caste as race, alienated South Indians from Sanskrit traditions, and continues to influence education and public discourse. Genetic studies debunk its claims, but its colonial imprints persist, fueling identity based fragmentation and undermining dharmic civilizational continuity. The Swadeshi movement ignited nationalist consciousness, leading to revolutionary actions. British patronage of the Muslim League interests, founded in 1906, as a counter to Congress, further divided the polity, foreshadowing 1947's catastrophic partition. The atrocities of Moplas and Malabar on the Hindus, causing forcible conversions, desecration of temples, foul outrages upon women, such as ripping open pregnant women, pillage, arson, and destruction. In short, all the accompaniments of brutal and unrestrained barbarism were perpetrated freely by the Moplas upon the Hindus. It caused deep communal rifts in Kerala. While Congress leaders initially portrayed it as anti British resistance, figures like Annie Besant and Gandhi condemned the communal atrocities. Partition reshaped South Asia's demography and identity. India's constitution enshrined secularism. Pakistan institutionalized Islamic identity. Partition wounds fueled the Kashmir conflict, the 1971 Bangladesh genocide, and ongoing minority persecution, leaving lasting scars across the subcontinent. There have been major communally instigated clashes even after independence. I shall briefly just enumerate them. The 1992 Babri Masjid riots, the Hazrat Mal riots of 1963, the Gopashtami massacre of 1966, Gujarat riots of 1969, Bangladesh Hindu genocide of 1971, massacre of Dalit refugees of 1979, Mandvi massacre 1980, the anti-Sikh program state-sponsored massacre of 1984, the Kashmiri Pandit exodus episode of 1990, state violence against Hindu car sevaks during the Ayodhya firing of 1990, the Vandhama massacre on the eve of Republic Day of 1998, chilling attack of 1998 but led by Lashkar-e-Taiba in Chapnari village in Chamba in Himachal Pradesh of 1998, Gauranga Tilla massacre, Bagher massacre in Tripura, Amarnath pilgrimage massacre of 2000 and several other such tragic events. Not to forget the Godhra train burning incident of 2011, the Mumbai terror attacks, Assam violence of 2012, the Bangladeshi anti-Hindu violence during Durga Puja of 2021, Pahalgam terror attack of 2025, then the Delhi shootout near the Red Fort very recently. There is probably no other country where the majority religion, however enlightened, mystical or spiritual, is ridiculed, while minority religions, however fundamentalist or even militant, are doted upon. The majority religion and its institutions are taxed and regulated, while minority religions receive tax benefits and have no regulation or even monitoring. While the majority religion is carefully monitored and limited as to what it can teach, minority religions can teach what they want, even if it's anti-national or backward in nature. Books are banned that offend minority religious sentiments, but praised if they cast insults on majority beliefs. There is probably no other country where it has become a national pastime among its educated class to denigrate its own culture and history, however great that has been over the many millennia of its existence. When the great archaeological discoveries of India's past are found, for example, they are not a subject for national pride, but are ridiculed as an exaggeration, if not an invention, as if they represent only the imagination of backward, chauvinistic elements within the culture. So, Hindu Dharma is a testament of resilience. For centuries, the Hindu civilization has endured relentless invasions, brutal conquests, forced conversions, and cultural erasure. There are several chronicles, literature, and writings left by tireless scholars and historians that needs greater exploration. To really understand what the current trending controversy, debate, and almost a national issue made by political parties and their leaders are, which is used to gain political advantage, and what it is all about. When they raise the issue of Sanatana Dharma and that we are being invaded by Guspetya and that they should be driven out, literally using words like chun chun ke and so on. This has created a certain unpleasant churning in the stomach, as it were, as to what is this new monster that has arisen when more than 80% of its population were peacefully going about their lives, careers, livelihood, and aspirations. What virus has attacked the Hindu Sanatana Dharma? That one political party wants to gain sovereignty over all the states in the country if the Sanatana Dharma of this country is to be protected. What has got into them that they are manipulating even demographical data to be elected unopposed so that they can fulfill some God-given instruction that they have been appointed to protect Sanatana Dharma and make this country a Hindu Rashtra and be so obsessed about it that it has become their sole agenda. And everything else merely a photo shoot operation for records of prosperity, for taking the credit for having initiated actions of development, not execution. So, in order to get the facts right, in order to understand what is being fed to us through social media and every platform possible about protection and preservation of Sanatana Dharma, we need to awaken. Today's generation need to awake. Understand and protect that what has been bequeathed to us. as Sanatana Dharma or eternal Dharma that defines Bharat. We, the people alive today in this country of Bharat, we call India, and who identify with that and reside even elsewhere, needs to get back to the records that sparks resistance, that forms the story of a civilization that refused to be erased. We are the inheritors of that legacy. We have to ensure that no more blood is spilled, no more temples are erased, and no more dharma is lost. We need not lift ammunition, but arm our minds with knowledge and our hearts with the resolve. We need to remember, we need to recollect, we need to recount, we need to protect that legacy. India is the cradle of dharma, but it is facing a new kind of warfare. Not of swords and invasions as has been hitherto in the past, right from the 450 AD until we gained independence, but of ideological infiltration, institutional capture, and civilizational erosion. In the modern battlefield, the judiciary, executive, and bureaucracy are not just administrative tools of the government machinery, but they are the guardians of Bharat's soul. Do they even represent it? Do they even realize what they stand for when seated in the parliament or Vidhan Sabhas? Do they have any idea what responsibilities that they have been entrusted with and what and to whom they are accountable for? They may not feel the need to be accountable to the 140 crores and more. But are they even aware they are sitting in chairs that carries the weight of centuries, if not yugas of Bharat's civilization? When these organs of government machinery become indifferent or are co-opted by anti-dharmic ideologies or globalist agendas, the nation is weakened from within. We are not able to speak for ourselves nor for our countrymen. A covert, deep state entrenched networks across academia, judiciary, NGOs, and media is often seen to work at odds with India's civilizational identity. To add to this is the foreign funded think tanks and international lobbies that manipulate narratives to fracture India's unity and dilute its traditions. In fact, it has reached a point where these forces are themselves seeking funding for financing their ill conceived ideas, agenda of being and maintaining that power just for the sake of Guinness Book of World Records, rather than for showing any worth in the minds and hearts and growth of the people of this country. These forces cannot be countered by noise or emotional or by emotion, by debates and sentimental outbursts. They must be met with intellectual discipline, strategic presence, and a dharmic conscience. Today, the youth, in fact, every citizen whose faculties are intact should rise, not in rebellion, but with responsibility, not for counter narratives, but to restore clarity. The goal is not power, but preservation of dharma, dharma rooted in ethics, courage, and cultural pride. Mere words won't do, whether in rhetoric or in condemnation, but by entering civil services, law, media, education, and governance, we can reclaim these institutions from inertia and subversion. Let the youth study India's true history, dust the archives, and dig out the gems from the past. Understand the philosophical bedrock of Bharat's Dharma, and then enter the system not as pawns but as protectors. It is not enough to light lamps in temples. In this connection, I remember an occasion when I had been to my hometown of Palakkad, Kalpathy, where as usual I go and visit the Chinmaya Mission temple where the deity is Guru Ayyappan. It also happens to be the birthplace of Swami Tapovan Maharaj. The Guru Swami Chinmayananda, who happens to be my Gurudev, it was in June 2005 when I visited that temple. And at that time, I noticed that the lamp was not burning. So I wrote to Guruji, Swami Tejamananda of the Chinmay Mission, who also was my Guruji for the Vedantic course at Chinmay Mission. Ever since he communicated to the temple, the lamp has been burning. Why I'm saying this is that keeping burning the lamp alive at a place of samadhi or a place of which is spiritually vibrant ensures divine connections. It becomes a conduit, a channel through which the divine can communicate with the living. Gods and sisters do not have a physical body like us, nor can they express in ways that we are familiar with. But through the Pancha Mahabhutas, the five primordial elements, the earth, fire, water, air, and space, they can navigate and they get the divine work done on earth. At most, we can be their instruments, be available when they need expression. When we reflect back over all that I've spoken in the past hour or so about the loss of Indian traditional scriptures, the burning of so many of the palm leaf records in the temple libraries, in so many universities, today our youth may feel, or even the present generation may feel, that where can we go for real, original, authentic text? Here it is that the Bhagavad Gita, where Shri Krishna ensures, whenever there is a dharma, I come to restore dharma. And Shri Krishna has been restoring dharma every time there has been decline and loss of scriptures. And this usually happens towards the end of Dwapara Yuga and beginning of Kali, or the middle of Dwapara Yuga and the transition period to Kali Yuga, when after a destruction of scriptures, the same are restored. One such scripture which was restored as late as 17th century was the Srimad Mudgal Puran, which was locked up in a trunk and lost, and I mean hidden. This came to surface when I was searching for books in Nagpur. It is a Srimad Mudgal Puran. This Puran is an essence of all the other 18 Purans. This was written by Sri Ganesh Yogindra Maharaj, who was from the Ambi village from Gujarat, and he came to Mayuresh Morgaon and settled down, and he wrote this. Ganesha, a Brahmin by the name of Dundiraj, believed to be Ganesha himself, came and handed over Sanskrit manuscripts every Chaturthi. The same was copied down, and the next Chaturthi, the Brahmin would come, take away this lot and hand over a fresh lot. Chaturthi to Chaturthi, all the scriptures were copied down, and later on, Ganesha Govindra Maharaj wrote a commentary for this in Sanskrit, and which later came to be the Srimad Mudgal Puran. He lived for 227 years, between 1499 to 1727, not very far away, just 300 years back. And that Mudgal Puran is why he had, now this Sri Ganesh Yogindra Maharaj is believed to be an incarnation of Mudgalacharya, who was from the Treta Yuga. He was the Veda Vyasa of Treta Yuga. Veda Vyasa of Dwapara Yuga, who divided all these Vedas into Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Samveda, Tharva Veda, and the 18 Puranas and the Mimamsas and everything, Itihasas, Puranas, and all these scriptures that are available to us today. The one that was missing was this Mudgal Puran. Because at that time, it was believed that he forgot to worship Ganesha before beginning his work. And so, then when he realized that he had forgot to worship Ganesha, his knowledge just disappeared. And he prayed to Ganesha, and Ganesha manifested, and at that time he was given the knowledge of by Brahma to Veda Vyasa. That which was given was the Ganesh Puran. That Ganesh Puran was all the incarnations or all the events, incidents happening as Ganesha, as son of Shiva and Parvati, where Parvati had, we all know the story which appears in the Shiva Puran and other Purans, where Parvati creates an idol of out of the mud of out of the dirt of her body, and gives life to it, and asks him to stand in front of the her room, and Ganesha does not allow Shiva to enter, and Shiva in anger beheads him with his trishul, and later an elephant's head was placed on this boy, and he was revived, and that was Ganesha. Now that Ganesha story, his leelas, his incarnations is given in the Ganesh Puran. Now that Ganesha, Shiva and Parvati prayed to that Ganesha that he should not go back to his Swananda Loka, and so he remained in Kailash, in Swananda Loka created in Kailash as Bhuswananda or Swarga Swananda in Kailash. And so the Brahmanaspati, the Lord of Brahmas, of all the Panchamahabrahmas, Panchadevas, that is Shiva, Vishnu, Shakti, Surya, and Ganesh, are all the Brahma who is in charge of all of that is Brahmanaspati, whose abode is Swananda Loka. So this manuscript, this scripture was revived because certain knowledge which was lost was restored. This is how the divine intervenes and restores dharma. The scriptures of dharma which was lost is restored.